Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is week 11 in the CFL. Ian Cameron and the birthday boy, 32nd birthday celebrated yesterday for Will Arndt, our guest, former CFL quarterback. Will, the birthday, no hangovers, no crazy wild parties, which speaks to the age we're getting to at this part of our lives. And we were talking before the show. We're pretty much interested in nice, low-key, quiet, subdued birthday parties at this part of our lives. But we hope you had a great birthday. Happy birthday to you. Hope it was an awesome one and many more years to come.
Yeah, thanks, guys. As we talked about, the older we get, the less we want, and you never understand it when you're a kid. You're like, no, like, what are you talking about? Like, bring on all the presents. I want all the things and all the attention. And as you get older, it's just funny how it works when you understand it. But yes, on a 30-second trip around the sun, and hopefully many more. So appreciate it.
No doubt, no doubt. Like I said, we're getting fine wine, getting better with age. It's just a number. It's just a number. It's how you feel. It's not what your age is. It's how you feel. That's what it boils down to. And if you feel great, doesn't matter what age you are. Life's good if you feel that way. If you really relish it, no matter what age you are, you can enjoy life. You know what I enjoyed? CFL games last week from a betting standpoint and from a viewing standpoint. Will 4-0 side sweep. Yeah, I think we hit most of the totals. It was just probably the most profit. It was not probably. It was the most profitable week for being the CFL last week. We were on the dog in all 4 games. I even went against my beloved Hamilton Ticats last week. We talked about it, that was just a tough spot for them. 3 road games in a row, short week after playing in Edmonton and having to play a rested, revenge-minded BC Lions team off a bye week. And BC was in a great game. It was. Back and forth, the Lions winning in overtime against the Ticats last week. It was on BC. I was on Edmonton. We both liked Edmonton and the Fajardo angle going into that game of him wanting to stick it to the Montreal Alouettes, his former team, that traded him away in the offseason. And what a drive he led in the last minute to pull the comeback win against the Edmonton Elks against Montreal in that game. We also saw an incredible shootout, Ottawa-Toronto, and Drew Brown he couldn't be stopped. He was on fire last Saturday afternoon against that horrific Argos defense, but a lot of credit still needs to be given to Drew Brown in the passing attack, which was just on a complete roll in that game. And it tells you how bad it was for the Argo defense, Will. They score 42 points, they lose the game. That tells you all you need to know. 46-42 Ottawa there. And, of course, the finale was another great game. Winnipeg-Calgary, tale of 2 halves. Winnipeg starting very strong in that game against the Stampeders. Got off to a great start. They were leading at halftime. In fact, they were up 17-0, I believe, at one point. And then all of a sudden, Calgary has a strong finish to the half, closes the deficit to 7. And then it was pretty much Calgary kind of taking control in the second half of that game and pulling one out with the Rene Paredes walk-off field goal with time expired to beat Winnipeg and come back and win 28-27 there. And a great way to start the show, Will, with Calgary, because they're the team on the bye week. Look, not pretty, not a great start at all. They fell way behind Winnipeg early in that game, but it's a sign of a good team, right? You don't panic. You keep playing. You realize it's 4 quarters, and we saw Calgary really get things rolling as that game went on. It was a struggle early for Vernon Adams, but still ended up with 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Dedrick Mills got the run game going for 105 rushing yards against Winnipeg last week in that comeback victory. They started to get a little bit healthier at receiver. Jalen Philpott played. Clark Barnes returned to the lineup, still without Damian Alford, the great rookie. And, of course, Reggie Bakelton is still out for an extended period of time. They were a little bit healthier at receiver, and they had a pretty solid game as some of those receivers. Philpott in particular had a really good game, and 2 touchdowns for Tevin Jones as well, who stepped up. And then the defense struggled in the first half. Zach Collaros was really having his way early in that game. Brady Oliveira, both running and catching the ball, was really good on offense early. But Calgary, credit to Bob Slowick, the defensive coordinator, who's got a lot of NFL experience as well, made those adjustments at halftime for that Calgary defense, and it was a totally different defensive performance from the Stamps in the second half, limiting Winnipeg to just 4 points They had a single, a rouge, and a Sergio Castillo long bomb field goal late in the fourth quarter. That was about it for the Winnipeg offense, and that is what allowed Calgary to come back. But for Calgary, Will, to go into this bye week, with where they're at, have a bunch of injuries. Remember, Vernon missed a game too, and PJ Walker had to start one game. And for them to still be able to go into that bye week with the record they have right now at 5-3 currently, and still in a pretty good spot overall in the West Division, in second place, and winning a game like that, where they didn't play their best game, they didn't play their best full 4 quarters in 60 minutes. It's a good sign for the Stampeders, Will.
Yeah, I think that's a sign of good coaching. And for my 2 years of coaching in the CFL, it's really hard to go in and make adjustments at halftime. So that's really an optimistic trait for them. I can tell you, it's hard when your game plan does not work to be able to pivot at halftime and make real tangible changes. Is interesting. To be sitting at 5-3 to where what we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year, I've been impressed. I think a lot of us, were wrong on the Stamps, but I don't know if they're a dangerous team to make a long run. I don't know about all that, but they've been, certainly better than I would have expected with the pieces they had coming into the year. We really doubted their defensive production coming into the year, missing all the starting guys and how bad they were before that. But yeah, color me impressed. And then, as we go into the rest of the teams this week, I just can't think about my time back as a player and how the league. I was always told like it's cyclical. The league takes turns doing things. Sometimes the offenses are hot, and then sometimes the defenses are hot. The couple of years that I was in the league, I remember just being like, "Gosh, like this is really hard, man. These defenses, like it's all these zones." We used to think we're in a cycle of the league if you zoom out, where the offenses are having production. I was looking at some stats, earlier this week around the league. I think like the average point line was like 67 points last week. There's a lot of good quarterback play. And if you listen to just the dialogue that we're saying and people are saying, like, there's not a lot of good defensive play. We keep saying the same things about a lot of teams. Like, BC's defense hasn't been very good. Winnipeg's defense has been atrocious. We're getting guys benched. And, Toronto's defense has been awful. And I think it just speaks to the language around the league of, offenses being hot and having good quarterback play.
It's not all the offense, like the quarterbacks, and there's been quarterbacks injured for multiple teams this year, and yet still the defenses are struggling. This is just, I think, defenses league wide and just overall talent depth at all the positions, whether it's D-line or linebacker or secondary, just not the quality of depth, that we're seeing across the league at the moment. And I don't think it's eventually there's going to be, I think, as the faces that are on these defenses get more familiar and more cohesion and more games under their belt, there'll be some improvement. But I don't think this is going to be anywhere close to, a phenomenal, tremendous defensive season league wide here in the CFL. And a lot of the numbers bear that out. You're looking at all these defensive rankings here overall for these teams and points allowed, and it's just it's a staggering statistics here on that side of the football across the league. So like I said, it's been offenses and a lot of special team scores have played into those point totals as well, Will. There's been a lot of situations where punt returns and kickoff returns, and it's been tons of kick return touchdowns, and at least setting the offenses up with short fields.
Right, 4 return touchdowns last week.
Yeah, there you go. And that's certainly having an impact, too, and why the league has just been, in general, a lot more high scoring so far this season, especially of late, no doubt. All right, let's get into the Week 11 card. It's another interesting card. Underdogs went 4-0 against the spread last week in the CFL. And just my initial glance at this week's card, we could have some more. This could be another good week for the Dogs, if you ask me, except for maybe 1 or 2 games. I could see the favorite doing well. This could be another week where at least a couple of the underdogs come through. And this could be one of them, the game we start off with on Thursday night, Ottawa, Winnipeg. We've got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 4-point home favorites, 52.5 the total in this game. There's always that element of, wow, Winnipeg is only laying 4 at home. Great home field, Princess Auto Stadium. Remember the last time Winnipeg played at home, They were a favorite in this kind of range against Toronto. They ended up winning and covering and winning 40-31 in that game. Now, Chris Drevler, remember, played in that game for the Blue Bombers because Zach Collaros was out due to injury. He played okay, still made a couple mistakes, but he also did move the football. Brady Oliveira got going on the ground. The Toronto defense is atrocious. That certainly played a role in that 40-point performance by Winnipeg. But you also have to peel back the layers and do your digging if you didn't watch that game and understand that, yeah, Winnipeg won and covered. It can make you think things are all good for the Bombers when they play at home, 40-31, getting the win and cover. Well, 2 of the touchdowns they scored in that game were kick return touchdowns by the same guy. And that tells you all you need to know right there. So if not for those 2 and it was Trey Vival, who has been, absolutely phenomenal for them in the kick return game of late for Winnipeg. He had not 1 but 2 kick return touchdowns in that game over the Toronto Argonauts. You take those touchdowns away, Will, and that's a game the Argos, believe it or not, could have won because Winnipeg was not slowing them down. Nick Arbuckle was able to move the football quite successfully in that game. Winnipeg and we both kind of liked the Blue Bombers plus the points last week, and we said we thought they'd be competitive, and sure enough, they had the start I expected, up 17-0, but unfortunately, bad second quarter let Calgary back in it. The offense bogged down in the second half when, as we mentioned, Calgary made their defensive adjustments, and they couldn't get anything going, and Calgary comes back and wins last week against Winnipeg. Tough loss. They're going to have to try to bounce back from that. They certainly could. There's always that element of, well, you're fading Winnipeg off a loss at home, and they're only laying 4. That can be tricky. I understand that, but there's just a ton of issues right now, Will, for the Bombers. The O-line's been shaky. Collaros has been under pressure a bunch. You saw it late in the game against Calgary. Didn't have time to step into the pocket and throw. The run game. And the thing with Oliveira is he's actually Ottawa on defense has had issues against the pass. The run defense is actually not too bad for Ottawa. So we'll see if Oliveira can get going. And then on the other side, the real mess for Winnipeg is the secondary right now. It's a complete and utter shambles at the moment. Multiple starters out. O'Shea already benched a couple of players a few weeks ago. And now all of a sudden, entering this game, you got Jamal Parker out. You got Terrell Bonds suffering a season-ending injury. Terrell Bonds has been there for a few years now. He's one of the more experienced boundary corners, and he is out now for the rest of the season. And they're going to put Trey Vival, who's been great at returning kicks. He's going to make his season debut in the secondary tonight for Winnipeg. So there's more deck shuffling of the deck chairs, Will, in the secondary. And in this league in particular, with the wide fields, having to cover so much ground, communication is paramount for success in the secondary, and people in that defensive backfield knowing where each other is going to be at all times. And I worry about that with another week coming in here tonight where we're going to see a lot of new faces in that Winnipeg secondary with the injuries mounting in that position group. So that's a concern, especially when you're seeing Drew Brown and the Ottawa passing game just hit their stride the last 2 weeks. He lit it up through the air against Calgary when they beat the Stamps out of the bye week. And then again last week, it was a really spectacular performance from Drew Brown. And he's got his receiving core mostly healthy now. We've got Geno Lewis. Obviously, we've got a great Justin Hardy now healthy. They've got Braylon Addison finally back from injury. Khalil Pimpleton is someone that is dangerous in space with the football in his hands. So this is suddenly, an Ottawa receiving core that can be very, very good. And we are seeing that right now as far as the way they're playing for Drew Brown. And then it helps that Brown is throwing the ball with great precision and accuracy right now. So this line opened with Winnipeg 6.5 point favorites early in the week. And I bet Ottawa right away, plus 6.5. I was able to get with them in this game. It's down to 4 now. I still lean Ottawa. I'm not laying more than a field goal with Winnipeg. I would say 3.5 would be the cutoff. If it were to ever fall to -3, I'd say don't bet Ottawa anymore because I don't know about win the game, but I certainly felt with the vulnerabilities of the Bombers secondary that getting 6.5 with a very lethal offense and a weakened pass defense was certainly worth a bet. I also took the Ottawa team total over 21.5. It's pretty much 22.5, 23.5 right now. Still a good number. You get it below the key number of 24. I like the team total for Ottawa. Look at Winnipeg's offensive numbers. If you look, or the numbers they've allowed, on defense as of late, they have given up over this team total that Ottawa's lined at tonight like 4 or 5 games in a row. That's how bad it's been for the Bombers defense. Yeah, they've given up 37, 41, 31, 31, and 28 in their last 5 games. So the opponent's gone over this team total of 22.5, 23.5, which it is for Ottawa here, 5 straight games. So I like that team total. I think if you miss the 6.5, you can bet the +4, but I would at the very least split it up and go +4, half a unit, team total over 22.5 for half a unit here for the Ottawa Red Blacks, because again, Winnipeg has allowed minimum 28 points in their last 5 games to their opponents. So I like those 2 looks. I like the full game over as well. There was an initial fear for me early in the week. There was supposed to be rain and wind tonight in Winnipeg. It looks like the majority of the rain and the wind is going to be done by kickoff. So it looks like the weather won't be as bad. Now, last year, people were wondering probably too, the Drew Brown narrative, right? He's going back to Winnipeg, stick it to his old team. It's not the same situation as Cody, Will, and I'll tell you why, because they helped him. They groomed him to be a starting quarterback. Zach Collaros was a great mentor to him, pulling him along, showing him the ropes, how to be a CFL quarterback, and they did a lot for his development. So I don't think he's going out there with an axe to grind. That being said, it's still a team you were with, and you'd like to beat them when you get the chance to. And last year, he already made a return to Winnipeg as a member of Ottawa in his first year with the Red Blacks last year, and he got off to a great start. And Ottawa was leading that game early. Then he got injured in the second quarter in Winnipeg last year when he played there, and he didn't return after that. Dustin Crum had to take over the rest of the game, and that's kind of when things fell apart for Ottawa in that game. They struggled on offense, they bogged down, and Winnipeg came back after a slow start and came back to win 25-16 last year at home against Ottawa. But this, the injury changed things, is my point. Ottawa was playing well in Winnipeg last year with Drew Brown starting in that game before he got hurt, and that's kind of when things unraveled for the Red Blacks last year when they played in Winnipeg. So I think Ottawa is live to at least be very competitive. I don't know about win the game, but at least be very competitive and make this another down-to-the-wire finish. And remember, we're coming off a week where we saw nothing but down-to-the-wire, thrilling conclusions decided in the final minutes last week in the CFL. Will, what do you think here for the first game of Week 11 on Thursday night, Ottawa, Winnipeg?
Yeah, another good get by you at 6.5. Obviously, I remember 2 weeks ago saying, Ottawa's in a, like, I never want to say it, but like a must-win, hot seat type of game going against Calgary and PJ Walker. And I pounded the table and I said, they have to get it done. They will find a way to get it done. And they've rattled off 2 wins in a row, and they're sitting at 3-6 with a position to really make a move with a bunch of East teams going down last week. And, the thing that's tough for me, and it's mostly from my personal experience, doing a little homework on this game. They haven't won here since August 17th. All right, so right around this time of year of 2018. That is 7 years ago. And I can recall on a lot of those years, because that was mostly a lot of the years I was there, just having a lot of trouble in Winnipeg. It's a tough place to play when they're rolling, and they're not rolling like they have been. But you mentioned some of the injury stuff. Looking at the injury report here, Ottawa's got a lot of guys on there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be getting points, the offense is rolling. But at the same time, not for nothing, they won the game last week and winning cures all, but they let up over 40 points. This defense has not been able to stop too much. So especially if the weather is just a little bit suspect, I think Winnipeg with Brady Oliveira and the offensive line and Willie Jefferson starting to play a little bit better. I think they're a little bit better for the weather that might end up coming that way. But gosh, it's hard for me to go against Winnipeg here, having not lost to these guys at home in 7 years.
That's the fly in the ointment. It's not the same Winnipeg team, but they're off a loss. They're only laying 4.
Yeah.
They were in this kind of a spot a couple weeks ago against Toronto, and they won and covered. They won by 9, 40-31. But again, 2 touchdowns that were kick returns for Winnipeg, and you erase those, and there's a chance they lose that game. And so that's what makes this a little bit tricky with where the number is right now. It was not tricky for me at 6.5. 6.5, Ottawa's a clear take for me. But 4 now makes it a little bit trickier because I could see Winnipeg like winning a 4-point, 5-point, 6-point type of game where if you got Ottawa early, you're good. If you got Ottawa late, not so good. No doubt. All right, good game that is, though. That's a very intriguing game to start the Week 11 slate. All right, Toronto Argonauts, Edmonton Elks. Friday night football tonight. I always love singing that. Edmonton, 3-point home favorites, 54 the total here in this one. This is another one where I hate to, unfortunately we record this show Wednesday and Thursday every week, depending on, availability and all that. There's going to be a ton of games where I'm betting them on Monday. And by the time we record this show on Wednesday and Thursday, the line's gone. And this is another example of that. I was on Edmonton plus 1.5. They were home underdogs when this line. I couldn't believe it. My jaw hit the floor. Shocked that Toronto was road favorites in this game where it opened, considering just how awful the defense has been and how they just find ways to lose. And Edmonton's coming in here with a little bit of momentum finally. After their second win of the season, the first since Cody Fajardo took over at quarterback. That thrilling finish in Montreal. What a drive. What a clutch drive by Cody Fajardo in the last 2 minutes in a game where he had to grind for that one, Will. He was, the offensive line struggled to protect. They were in on him quite a bit. That Adeyemi Berglund, who I think is leading the CFL in sacks now for Montreal, he was all, in on Fajardo a ton last week in that game. And yet when the game was on the line and they had one final chance, Will, to put a drive together, get in the end zone and win the game, Cody Fajardo and the Edmonton Elks did it. And you got to give Cody and the offense a lot of credit for that, because again, it was a struggle. I know, because, I was rooting like hell for Edmonton, having a bet on them in that game. And it was a struggle. But sure enough, Edmonton put the drive together. The defense kept them in the game as well. And by the way, it was a borderline unforgivable pick six thrown by McLeod Bethel Thompson late in that first half. It was a complete game changer. Montreal was actually dominating the first half, in complete control. The offense for Edmonton was struggling. All he had to do late in that first half was protect the football, ball security, let Maltos, who's a great kicker, put 3 points on the board at least before halftime. And then you go up, 16-3 or whatever it was going to be. Instead, pick six, terrible throw, even worse decision to throw that football the other way by Tyrell Ford, returning it, Trey's brother, for a pick six late in the half. And all of a sudden, it's a 2-point game at half. There's a complete swing. It was a turning point in that game. And Edmonton felt right at that moment that, hey, we are in this game, and we have ourselves maybe a chance here to win this game. And sure enough, then MBT was benched. Caleb Evans took over in the second half for Montreal, and even with him, it was a struggle on offense, and the defense hung in there for Edmonton, and Cody was able to win it at the end. But it was a big building block win for Edmonton, and I think they can build on that here, because these are two teams going in opposite directions. That being said, this number was 1.5 with Edmonton as a home dog. They're now laying 3. And this is still a 2-win team. That's it, 2-6 on the season. And you are now asking them to win by more than a field goal when they have not been favored yet this season. That's right. Edmonton hasn't been a favorite yet this season. So this is a dubious, rare point spread error, as I would say, for the Edmonton Elks here in this game. They are not favored often. They are not used to being favored all that often. And we'll see if they are able to handle that here. So it's one of these deals where I think Edmonton wins what I would do is, if you really want to bet Edmonton, there's still some minus 150s to minus 155s out there with the money line. I would take that instead of the -3. I could definitely see this being a 1 to 3 point Edmonton win, because there is still some level of doubt for me that they can win by a big margin. I don't see how Cody and the offense doesn't have success here. I mean, this is a Toronto defense that's lost its way. They lost everybody on the D-line last year, multiple new faces in the secondary. Wynton McManus has been in and out of the lineup with injuries this year. Cam Judge, the other key linebacker who they got in the offseason, he may not play in this game. DeMonte Coxey's banged up, one of their best receivers. So we'll see if he suits up for Toronto. So the defense is just in a world of hurt. They've given up 86 points in the last 2 games. Just absolutely miserable numbers right now for this Toronto defense. And it's a shame for a guy like Nick Arbuckle, because he's not the problem. It's not his fault. He has been awesome. The ball. The offense is moving this ball. They've scored 31, 31, and 42 in the last 3 games, and they've lost 2 of those games. And that's because of how bad the defense has been. So I'm on Edmonton at plus 1.5. I would say if you're going to take them now, take the money line. I'm also going to go with an old Ian Cameron special here on this game, Will. And I've picked my spots with this over trifecta, and it's worked out well. I did this with a game in Edmonton earlier this year. It was when Ottawa was there. I said take both teams over their team total and the full game over. It went 3-0 in that game. I think it could go 3-0 in this game. Toronto team total over 25.5. Edmonton team total over 27.5, and the full game over for this game. Last year, these teams played twice, 39-36, 31-30 were the scores of those two games, Argos versus Elks. Both of them flew over the total, and both of them, in both games, both team total overs would have cashed. So, and I just feel I trust the offenses a lot more than the defenses here in this game. So I'm going to go with that as well. In addition to what I bet early in the week with Edmonton at plus 1.5, Edmonton's team total over, Toronto's team total over, and the full game over, which is up to 54 now in some spots. High total, but again, you had 75 points in one game last year and 61 points in the other in the two games between Toronto and Edmonton last year. So definitely chances it could get there again. Will, what do you think for Friday night, Argos Elks?
Yeah, so I think first thing I want to say is apologies about a little bit of background noise. I'm at the airport. As you guys know, I'm a traveling man. But I deserve an Oscar for this performance right now because I got some good thoughts here. So this is my favorite one of the week in terms of matchups. I think Edmonton's win last week is a season changer. I think it's an identity shaper where you go after that game and that win, you're like, all right, we got our guy. We know our identity. We know we can win in a big spot. Good Montreal team that's missing their quarterback, and a season saver of a 3 points is no problem. I think they're going to take care of business at home. I think Toronto's got a lot. I think they've been trying to hang on for dear life. Their defense hasn't been good. Nick Arbuckle's been playing out of his mind, and they still have not been able to get it done. And like you mentioned, they've just found ways to lose. So, I like Edmonton. This is one of my favorite bets of the week to win outright and to really start to get things in order. Looking at their injury report, not a lot of guys are banged up. And I just think at home, this is a really good spot for me.
All right. Never mind -3. Lay it, says Will Arndt here with the Edmonton Elks. Have no fear. They can win by margin. I think they can too. It's just we're not at all used to Edmonton being the favorite. That's the only the concern I have. But Toronto's in a good amount. And if you look at the two injury reports too, Will, there's a bunch of guys on the Toronto injury report. And other than Royce Mechie and the punter, Cody Grace for Edmonton, other than those two guys, they're a pretty healthy team this week, Edmonton. So that definitely is a benefit for them here as well. On we go to Saturday, where we have a doubleheader. My Ticats looking to bounce back. There was a crushing loss, heartbreaker last week against BC on Shea Gilgeous-Alexander's big night back in his hometown. BC ends up winning in overtime. Hamilton, Saskatchewan now in Regina out west. Riders 3.5-point home favorites. The 7-1 Saskatchewan Rough Riders. The 7-1 West Division leading Saskatchewan Rough Riders. 3.5-point home favorites, 54 the total. When I first looked at this, I'm like, well, hold on now. Saskatchewan is a better team than us. Saskatchewan's rolling. They're 7-1. Why is this line only 3.5 with Saskatchewan here at home, where we know that's a great home environment with Mosaic Stadium? And off a bye week with extra time to prepare, rested. They don't have many injuries. Hamilton definitely has a few more injury concerns, especially Stavros Katsantonis, the great cornerback or great defensive player in our secondary, and Jamal Peters, our veteran corner. Both of them got banged up last week against BC, and both are very questionable to play Saturday. That could make for some shuffling in the secondary and down two of your better players in the secondary. All that being said, I can't help but think about this spot for Saskatchewan and how similar, Will, it is to the spot that they had against Calgary a few weeks ago. They started the year 4-0, straight up and against the spread, playing great football, rolling, totally in sync, in rhythm. Then they had their first bye week of the season after the 4-0 start, playing Calgary at home, big game after the bye week. and it was by far their worst game of the season. They laid an egg. It was a clunker. They were flat. They were out of sync, out of rhythm. You could just tell right away. Saskatchewan's just not sharp. And they fell behind early against Calgary, and Calgary led wire to wire. And Calgary ended up shutting down my guy, Trevor Harris, who's had a great season in the Saskatchewan offense, but they had their worst game of the season. Off of that bye week, following the 4-0 start at home against Calgary, they lost 24-10 in that game. The game wasn't even up for grabs late. Calgary was just in complete control of that game. And if you look back last year, Corey Mace, and he's done a great job. There's no denying that. But the one flaw for Corey Mace has been his teams always haven't been great off a bye week, especially when they've been playing well going into the bye week. And now look what we have here, Will. We got another spot where Saskatchewan's rolling going into the bye week. What was the game they played before the bye? That game where they absolutely thumped the Montreal Alouettes 34-6 a couple weeks ago. Bethel Thompson stunk. He was terrible. The defense was great for Saskatchewan, but Trevor was just bing, bang, boom. I mean, he was just a surgeon with in the passing game, just dissecting that Montreal defense. 34-6, rolling going into the bye. Everyone's singing their praises out there in Ryderville. Now a bye week, and I worry a little bit. They were just totally out of sync, out of rhythm, flat, you name it, coming off the bye when they were rolling going into it weeks ago against Calgary at home. Are we going to see that again here? Is it going to be the same thing? Because my general thought process, Will, is, and I'm going to throw it to you before I continue on this game, bye weeks for teams that are rolling and playing well going into the bye week, not a good thing. The teams that are struggling going into the bye week, it's a good thing. You have the chances to correct things, make adjustments, get some injuries back. But I find sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes bye weeks for teams playing great football going into the bye weeks are a bad thing. They're a negative, and sometimes the performance coming out of the bye week can reflect that. What say you?
Yeah, I think anecdotally, I think you're more likely to start flat. I think you're not going to come out guns a blazing and get up on a team, and then it takes you about a half to be able to figure it out. I generally feel the same way, but if you zoom out, and that's what I try to do now that I'm not in the locker room, there's never a bad thing of getting healthy and getting rest, and what do you want to go into a bye week struggling? So to me, I like them in this spot here. They're at home. They're off a bye. They just played good football, and this is a potential Grey Cup match. So I like Hamilton. I like Saskatchewan. This is, to me, the two big dogs in each division, and that's the game I'm most interested to watch this week, just as a fan. But I don't want to overthink it. You could swing it however you want going into a bye week, but ultimately they're rested, they're healthy, they just played good football, and I like them in this spot at home.
I understand that completely. I do. And I'm even having a hard time. Like I got a 4.5. I took that 4.5 with Hamilton early in the week. I don't love this injury report, though, for Hamilton. I must admit that. It's not looking as good later in the week here as it was early in the week. Wooden, their great kick returner, looks like he's going to be out again. And like I said, not just two great secondary players, two of their best, Katsantonis and Peters, both may not play here in this game. And against a guy like Trevor Harris, you worry about that. Pass rush better get home. The one thing with Trevor is you get a pass rush on him, he's a dead duck because he's not Mr. Mobile. But again, that's up to the front. They're going to have to get that pass rush. Julian Hauser, where are you? And all those guys up front for Hamilton. They're going to have to collapse that pocket and don't give Trevor Harris the time to throw that football, because that's where he can kill you, because he's a timing quarterback. He's a timing passer. If he gets the time and he's in rhythm, and you can't affect his timing with the pass rush, you're going to be in for a long day, correct?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And I think the big thing I'm also thinking about is, Hamilton's tough stretch continues. They had that 3-week span out west, and then they had the short week against BC at home, and they ultimately lost that game.
And now they're back on the road out west. And the one saving grace for them here, though, Will, is extended time between games. They played Thursday night last week, and now it's a Saturday game this week. So at least they get a little bit more time to catch their breath and prepare before having to go back out there again. Yeah.
Yeah, but you could also say they're now playing the best team in the CFL on the road and
Yes.
probably one of the toughest environments.
Definitely. I would say this, and I said this on another show I did earlier today. Jimmy the Bag, my good friend, I'm on his show every Thursday. First half, Hamilton plus 2.5 might even be a better bet if you like the
Bang.
Ticats, the full game.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if they hang on for 60 minutes in this tough environment here at Mosaic. But in the first half, with Saskatchewan, a little sleepy, a little dopey, a little out of sync, out of rhythm. First half of football after a bye week and playing so well going into the bye week, I could see them having a slow start and maybe a fast finish, and they come back and they win. And Hamilton, going back years, has been prone to having leads and giving them up. So, that could be the case here. So I think first a situational look to Hamilton first half, plus 2.5. Just if you don't trust them for the full game, and there's some level of lack of trust that I do have for Hamilton, because I do acknowledge I think Saskatchewan's a better football team, certainly a better defense than Hamilton. So you can't compare these two teams defensively. Saskatchewan's got a better defense than we do. That being said, the offenses, I think, can go toe-to-toe. We do have a great offense. Tim White and Keandre Smith, and, of course, the big dog, Kenny Lawler. That's as good a trio as you could ask for in the CFL. And, Saskatchewan's secondary has given up the odd big play. So, and it's a great battle. The two old gunslingers going head-to-head here. And honestly, they are the two oldest quarterbacks in the CFL right now. Trevor's 39, Bo is 35. But you could say they're the two best quarterbacks at the moment, two of the best quarterbacks in the CFL at the moment, the way they played this season. Yeah. So Trevor Harris and Bo Levi Mitchell, that matchup.
Rematch. The Grey Cup, obviously they were on different teams, but they faced off in the Grey Cup back in 2019.
Yeah.
In Edmonton.
I made the quibble on social media, and I texted this to Trevor Harris as well. He did a little segment on Saskatchewan television he did the weather forecast, the weather report, and he brought his two kids on the set, and they presented the forecast. Oh, it's going to be sunny and 27 for game day, and his kids were there with him. And he's made for that kind of stuff, as you know. He's just such a great speaker, great with the microphone, as you know. And I did the old quip to him after that spot, said to him, you left out the fact that there's going to be a Ticat attack in the forecast on Saturday. But, he said, we'll see about that. He said, yeah, we'll see about that. Yeah, but I just had to. But, yeah, sure, that's a great game. I'm with you 100%. As far as from a viewing and a fan standpoint, that's a very intriguing game. The first place in the East versus first place in the West. Like I said, should be interesting. And has Hamilton benefited 6-3 from Montreal not having Davis Alexander? Because I think if Davis Alexander did not get injured at any point this year, I think Montreal would be the first place team in this division. But nevertheless, it is what it is. We're first. Yep. They're first out in the West, Saskatchewan, and it should be a great game. The total I lean over, but I don't like it as much, because I'll say the one thing about this game. It's a bigger game. Hamilton's defense has struggled, but, Saskatchewan off the bye, they're off the last bye, the one I've talked about, the one I referenced, the Calgary game at home off the bye week, which followed them starting 4-0 when they were flat. They only put up 10 points in that game. The offense was out of sync. So I know Hamilton's defense is sketchy, but that's a pretty high total for Saskatchewan off a bye when they only put up 10 points the last time they were off a bye week. So, yeah, you're saying under. Yeah, I could see it. This is one where I'm not over.
Saskatchewan, strong defense. Yeah, has a chance to be an underwhelming, not underwhelming, but just a game for the under, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is definitely one where I'm not racing to bet the over like I am for the first two games here on this CFL slate. All right, let's wrap it up. Our final game for Week 11: the Montreal Alouettes and the BC Lions. That old game, Where's Waldo? Well, it's where's our quarterback? That's the new game here for the Montreal Alouettes. Where is it, and who's it going to be? BC 7-point favorites now. This line opened 4 with BC as home favorites. Now the Lions are laying 7 here at home. 51 the total across the board in this game. Actually 51.5 in some spots, so make sure you shop around for the total. The numbers moved because of the Montreal situation. It's a bunch of issues for Montreal. Let's start with the injuries, and they got a bunch of them. That's the number one concern. You look at Montreal, the defensive injuries we've talked about last week. There was no Marc-Antoine Dequoy. He was out. There was a couple other players in that. KB Anento. There were a couple other players banged up. for Montreal in that secondary. And we have no injury report updates yet because they have not practiced this week, Montreal. They were supposed to on Tuesday and Wednesday. They didn't practice, Will. Excessive heat. They just did. It was just so hot, and the humidity was so bad that Montreal, for precaution and and thinking of the best for their players, they didn't practice. Their first practice day is the day as we're recording this on Thursday. So who knows if they're going to get any of their injured players back? Is Duquois going to be back in the secondary, and he's significant? Ento, they've had a couple of linemen banged up. It's definitely been a lot of injuries for Montreal, and it's showing. They're not playing great. And then, of course, the bigger issue is the quarterback play. In spite of all the injuries, they had a chance to beat Edmonton last week. And in spite of all the injuries, they had a chance. Saskatchewan, they got blown out, but McLeod Bethel Thompson was not good. But last week, they had a chance. The defense played okay. They hung in there. It was a struggle for Fajardo, but they do not currently have a quarterback that in a big clutch spot can move the football and put him in the end zone. It certainly not MBT, and it was just like I said, borderline unforgivable. Pick six at the end of the first half with you in complete control. And even Jason Moss said, that's enough of the bullshit. You're out. Sit down, to McLeod Bethel Thompson. And in came Caleb Evans. And unfortunately, Caleb Evans was a little bit better, I think, than MBT, but still struggling to finish drives when he was out there. And that's significant. They're stalling. They're settling for field goals. The defense is out on the field a lot, and the defense is doing the best they can, but eventually, you got to have a little bit more effectiveness and efficiency offensively. If you look at the BC side of the equation, injury-wise, Gary Peters is the only concern, but it looks like he's going to be back, which is good. It looks like he'll be fine and he'll play. Huge win for Buck Pierce and the BC Lions here in Hamilton last week. I mean, it felt like the season kind of getting away just a little bit from them. Now, the defense is still the concern. You gave up 38 points in that game, even though you won to Hamilton. But Nathan Rourke played with that I'm not going to let our team lose mentality last week. He was just absolutely outstanding, extending plays, keeping plays alive, with his legs throughout that game, avoiding sacks, just big plays down the field. Nathan Rourke had a hell of a game last week here in Hamilton. That offense is still very good when he's on his game, obviously. And then if James Butler can give him a little something in the run game, they can be a very dangerous. And we know the receiving core is good with Eberhardt and McGinnis and Katoy and Hatcher, and certainly they have enough receivers to work with BC, no doubt. And the O-line's starting to play better as well. Defense is still a little suspect against the run, which means if I'm Montreal, I'm certainly going to feed, especially with my quarterback situation and Davis Alexander still out, I'm going to feed Sean Thomas Erlington, Travis Tice, my two running backs, quite a bit here in this game and test that BC run defense. This is a tricky game from a side perspective at the current numbers. Now, early on, I didn't have a strong opinion either when BC was -4. But I got to admit, even with Caleb Evans confirmed as the starter, and by the way, McLeod Bethel Thompson's now on the 6-game injured list, so we're not going to see him for a while. And they signed Cameron Dukes, former Toronto Argonauts quarterback. He'll be the backup now to Caleb Evans. But Caleb Evans is going to start here in this game. He has some mobility, which McLeod Bethel Thompson does not. Still, his accuracy, from one down to the next, throwing the football, it's still a work in progress for Caleb Evans. And he needs some receivers back, too. Keep in mind, Austin Mack didn't play last week. Tyson Philpott's been out for a while. Are they going to get those two guys back in the receiving core? And they've had to rely a lot on Tyler Sneed and Charleston Rambo and Cole Speaker the last few weeks. And they do have depth at receiver, Montreal, but Mack and Philpott are two of your bigger receivers. We'll see if they get back. This line, though, at 7, and BC has owned Montreal, too. I think that's what bettors have pushed this toward BC because of the injuries, the quarterback situation, probably the fact they didn't practice, and they got to fly out west, which is always a tough spot. And Montreal's been owned by BC. BC has just dominated this series. They came back and stole one from Montreal a few weeks ago in Montreal, 21-20. Nathan Rourke leading them on a comeback field goal drive to win that game late. But at 7, I can't lay it with BC. I've got too many concerns about the defense still. Laying bigger points is not something I'm interested in. Now, I'm not saying I'm betting Montreal now at +7, but I'm tempted. I tell you this, I'm leaning Montreal at the current number because even though it is Caleb Evans, the injury report's going to play into this. I want to see if Mac and Philpott are back at receiver. I want to see if some of their injured players in that secondary are going to be back, or is Dequoy playing? Is Ento playing? These are things I want to know before making a final decision. But I'm not laying 7 with BC now. If you got BC early, great. I think the ship has sailed now if you want to lay 7 with BC. And I'll throw in another nugget at you here, Will, with this game. And that's what makes it tricky here to lay at 7 now with BC. The Montreal Alouettes since 2023, their last 6 games when they've been lined as a +6 underdog or more. So they've been getting 6 or more points as a dog. Montreal is 6-0 against the spread in those games. The last 6 times they've been a dog of 6 points or more. We saw it earlier this year, even with McLeod Bethel Thompson at quarterback. Will, they were 6.5, 7-point road underdogs at Calgary earlier this year. They won that game outright, and they were in it from start to finish against the Stamps. So I am at 7 or better. I could only look toward the Alouettes here, even though they're injured, even though they didn't practice much this week, even though they got to fly out west, even though BC's dominated them. All of that is now built into this current line at -7, which means to me the value is now shifted to Montreal. I've got to see who's in first for Montreal with these injuries before I pull the trigger. But I'm at least tempted by Montreal now at +7 or better. I lean under as well here, Will. The thing we've talked about with Montreal on this show, it's been a theme, right? No Davis Alexander, no overbet for me in a Montreal game. Without Davis Alexander, they're now on 5 straight games for Montreal have gone under the total. And the game plan is not going to change just because it's Caleb Evans instead of McLeod Bethel Thompson. We're not going to ask Caleb Evans to do too much. Intermediate, short passes, run the football, conservative game plan, time of possession, keep the, churn out drives and, rely on your defense to hold you in the game like they did last week, or at least tried to against Edmonton last week. They did a hell of a job holding them in that game against Edmonton because Fajardo struggled until that last drive that he put together. So I think this is Montreal has been definitely an under machine in these games without Davis Alexander at quarterback. And it wouldn't, even with BC's defensive issues, it wouldn't shock me to see that under theme continue for Montreal here on Saturday. Will, what do you think for the finale of Week 11, Alouettes Lions?
Yeah, so I like that we disagree. This is good. We said last week, it's like, man, we got the same opinion. We disagree on this one and a couple of them this week, which is good. So I don't like Montreal here. Even at 7 points, I got no problem giving that up at all.
Oh, wow. So blowout city, says Will, for the BC Lions here.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is one of my favorites of the week. I think they haven't practiced. They're beat up. So you don't even get a chance to go through protocol with trainers as a player. Like, you have to clear protocol. It's Thursday. And, you got Caleb Williams. I was a quarterback's coach in Ottawa. I had
Caleb Evans. So you're thinking of the Bears.
I'm sorry. My fault.
Yeah, I do that. So, I've done that before too. Yeah.
So I coached Caleb Evans in my time in Ottawa, and I also, the last team I played for was the BC Lions with Nathan Rourke. I know the difference between the two, and at home, Montreal's in a really tough spot. You have
personal experience in the league working alongside and or with both Nathan and with Caleb. Very interesting.
So, yep. So that part to me is a stark difference, just having firsthand experience. And then Montreal's got to go as far as you can possibly travel in the CFL, all the way out to Vancouver. They haven't won in Vancouver since 2015, and BC has won the last 5 matchups in a row. So with that backdrop, and with the fact that Montreal lost to them earlier this year, be that by a point, but still, I think this is the spot where I think BC could absolutely win by a touchdown or more here. I got no problem giving it up. You guys have probably known by now I'm on the Nathan Rourke train. I think he's going to be going on a run here to kind of make his MOP case, but I think BC had a great win last week. Their offense has been highly productive, and at this spot at home versus this quarterback, where this defensive coordinator also knows who this quarterback is, because they were both in Ottawa together when I was there in 2022. I don't think there's a lot of mystery factor, So I really like BC in this spot to roll. Unfortunately, Montreal just got a really tough hand of cards to beat out this week.
That's a good case you made for BC. I will say that, no doubt. You made a lot. Like, it is tough. This is tough. This is the injuries. This is one practice day is not much, especially when you've got, you're trying to integrate new players that are taking the spot of injured players, and then you got to fly out there and play on Saturday night. And you're just the series history. It's dominant toward BC. Like, BC has completely owned Montreal head to head. Regardless of in Montreal or in BC. There's been some real lopsided victories in favor of the Lions here in BC over the years against Montreal as well. So, yeah, as you can tell, it's 7 or more. I'm tempted by Montreal, but I need to see everything in front of me here. I need to see that they're healthier. They get some of their guys back in the secondary. Maybe that Campbell, that one of their better offensive linemen, comes back. If that's all true, then maybe we dabble with something on Montreal, and even then, it won't be anything close to best bet material. But like I said, Will's points are very valid. It's a very, very dubious spot situation, given the elements, given the factors, given the lack of practice time for Jason Moss and the Montreal Alouettes entering this game. Great stuff, Will. Awesome. Another great show here. CFL Week 11 edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Hit the like button on the way out. Make sure you do that. We got a tough act to follow, Will, with best bets here for CFL Week 11, because it was a hell of a performance for both of us last week, but we're hoping to provide an encore for our audience here in Week 11. So with that in mind, Will, CFL Week 11, best bet. What do you got?
Let's go back to the Toronto-Edmonton game. And again, apologies about the noise. Just an absolute stellar performance by your boy. And let's try to keep that going with a third good best bet in a row. I'm going to go Edmonton. Laying down 3, absolutely no problem. They are going to have a turn in their season here. They got the franchise quarterback. They got their identity. I think their defense is going to play better. They're one of the best teams in the league running the football. They're at home. They're coming off of a very big season-defining win, and I think Toronto's just got a lot, stacked against them. And I think it's time for them to start having some success in Edmonton. I like them to win this week, even laying down 3.
There you go. Those Elks, the Edmonton Elks, -3 against Toronto for Will Arndt with his CFL Week 11 best bet. I had someone tell me, actually, and I'll ask you this now, Ian, aren't you concerned they had that big comeback against Toronto? They had a big celebration after, because it was such a huge comeback win after being down 22-1. Don't you feel they might be a little bit flat going back home this week against the Argo, or not? Sorry, not. I'm getting them mixed up. Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal. There you go. Cody Fajardo's big revenge game in Montreal. They win it at the end. They celebrated in the locker room big time with Mark Killam, the head coach, after. Aren't you worried they'd be a little bit flat for this game back home against Toronto? And my response personally to that would be, well, hold on now. You're a 2-win football team on the season. When you finally taste victory to get to 2-6, and you look at the standings and you see, wait a minute, 3rd and 4th in the East are 3-6, 2-7. We can cross over from the West Division to the East Division this year and maybe make the playoffs if we can get on a run. Don't you feel that after finally getting a win, instead of flat and you fall off, that it galvanizes you and you say, hey, we finally figured it out. Let's keep it rolling, boys. That's kind of what I think. What do you say about that?
That's the way I see it. I think they've been bad for so long. Edmonton's been a really tough place to be a player. And then there's guys in that locker room that have been through that. They're not going to let that happen, or let you be flat, or let you have bad practices after, because just be a bad football team and just to lose and roll your helmet out there every week and not really have a chance. So I don't see that as a concern, just given the backdrop of that organization's history and the people that I do know inside that building. So I think it's one of those things where you're going to start to have a little bit of a culture shift, and I think they can kind of rally around the wind and use it as momentum.
All right, there you have it. Great insight there from Will with, and again, Edmonton -3 with his best bet. My best bet here for Week 11 in the CFL. I'm going to go with I'm going to go with that Ottawa team total over 22.5. Let's get it going with an early in the week best bet to get the week started. Ottawa Red Blacks team total over 22.5 against Winnipeg. Again, Winnipeg's given up 27 or 28 plus now in 5 straight games. I think Ottawa can get over that team total. So Ottawa team total over 22.5 for my CFL Week 11 best bet. And by the way, I misspoke earlier in the show when I mentioned Calgary's record. Of course, they're the team on the bye week. They're not 5-3. They're 6-3. after last week's win. So 6-3 for Calgary, second place in the CFL West Division. Another great show, Will. Awesome job as always. Always great to have you. Audience is saying nothing but positive reviews and comments about your appearances here on the show. Anything you want to say? Any last words before we sign off?
No, I mean, I think the whole point of us being on is that hopefully we're right more than we're wrong. So we had a good week together last week, and or else nobody really wants to hear from us, no matter how good people we are, how entertaining we might be. So hopefully we have another hot week this week. Let's keep it going, guys.
Yo, trust me, the energy that I bring and the comedy and the little jokes I throw in there, that's just an addendum. People want winners. People want good picks at the end of the day and good football analysis. So trust me, that's just the extra stuff you get with this show. At the end of the day, people come here for good insight and hopefully winners. And hopefully we can deliver again like we did last week. Good stuff. Hit the like button on the way out. For Will Arndt, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week. Enjoy CFL Week 11, and we'll be back next week for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.